Good morning. There's a storm swirling around Okanagan College in the interior of British Columbia. And it's a storm that's blown up seriously since November, since a man by the name of Frank Paul, the executive director of the Kalamalka Centre of that college, was severed, all very complicated, was severed from his job. And the storm asking for a public inquiry is supported by up to 20 organizations. And one man who's here this morning to try and enlighten you on his worries about the lack of a public inquiry is Mayor Neil Davidson of Vernon. Somewhat ill-considered, confusing, if not a stupid law altogether. So Sunday shopping you'll hear about too. But first, we're going to look at the crisis at Kalamalka. Crisis at Kalamalka. And try and get, even without the presence of anybody from the board of directors of the Okanagan College, some semblance of understanding and perhaps sanity into this complex story after the break. See this book here? This is a compendium of the public protests which have come about in the interior of British Columbia since Frank Pauls was severed as his job as director of the Kalamalka Centre of the Okanagan College. I have seldom seen such a storm of protest so quickly over a story, so there's got to be something behind it. For instance, there's a list here of 17 particular groups which are campaigning and advocating an impartial inquiry into what they describe as the forced resignation. Apart from that, the City Council of Vernon has twice recommended a public inquiry. The Board of Directors of the Okanagan College, the basic headquarters of this educational unit, which handles about 25 to 30,000 people in day and night schools throughout the interior, in 4 campuses at Kelowna, Penticton, Vernon, Kalamalka, and Salmon Arm, as well as storefront operations elsewhere. Now, before I talk to Frank Pauls at all, I want from Neil Davidson, whom some of you older people may remember as a liquor commissioner with a bishop and a teamster some years back, I want you to try and put a concise summary to me of your concerns, because normally the severance of a faculty person from an educational college is a personnel matter, and generally speaking it's underneath the table. Now, what is the concern over the forced departure of Frank Paul from Kalamalka Centre?
Well, Jack, can I go back a little bit into history? I'm here perhaps more as a historian than I am in anything else, because I've been involved in the post-secondary educational scene in the North Okanagan area for some 20 years, even before the MacDonald Report. And I've had an interest in it both as an individual and now latterly in my civic responsibilities as well. To give you a little bit of history, some 15 to 20 years ago, the entire Okanagan Valley voted on the existence or otherwise of a community college. The Penticton opted out at that particular time, but there was a referendum throughout the whole valley, up and down the valley, as to whether or not we wanted a community college. The referendum was directed specifically at a site near Kelowna. That referendum was defeated by the entire valley. So consequently upon that defeat, the College Council of the day said, fine, if we're not going to have a single campus, then we're going to have a multi-campus facility up and down the valley. In other words, we're going to bring education to the people rather than people to the education. So this is what we're going to have. And that is what we understood all up and down the valley we were going to have, was a multi-campus concept. Well, we have that, but it hasn't evolved in anywhere near the way that we think it should have evolved. Parallel development was the watchword of the moment. We knew perfectly well that there was going to be a core facility, and if for political reasons, if no other reasons, that core facility was going to be located in the Kelowna area. We knew that. We also knew that where there are sophisticated courses, expensive courses in sciences and things of that nature, we were not going to have total parallel development. But we did expect a reasonable semblance of parallel development all up and down the valley. That has not, in fact, happened. I understand, I haven't seen them yet, but I understand there'll be clips coming on your program today indicating the comparisons between the various centers that there are.
There may not be, but maybe you're giving me too much history.
All right.
This particular storm is over the departure of Frank Pauls. Now,
I want to relate that.
But you're going to tell me right off the bat that it's because of some dissatisfaction in your community or in the headquarters of the college about the development and location of the Kalamalka Centre.
No, it isn't that. It's that we in the North Okanagan are not getting the education facilities that we think we should have had that we were promised originally. So consequently, the Frank Paul issue is a very real issue. And we're saying that that could be the flashpoint. It could be the straw that broke the camel's back in relation to an entire dissatisfaction throughout the whole of the Okanagan Valley. Frank Paul has a legitimate complaint, and we're saying that it is reflected in his complaint and the furor that results from it.
Is this a political dismissal in your view?
I don't know what context you're using political, but I don't think so. No, I think it's just a matter for the College Council to decide, and they did so.
Is it a performance dismissal in your view?
No.
What is it then? I mean, before I speak to Frank Paul.
I cannot honestly answer that, except that I do know that Frank Paul has taken a very active interest in promoting the interests of the, you might say, the North Okanagan area in relation to the whole college scene, and I suspect that that's been resented in some quarters.
Now, your council has asked for what?
Just a review, a full investigation into the release of Frank Paul.
You want a public inquiry?
We do.
Now, here is Frank Paul. Are you free to speak to me, Frank?
Yes, I am.
Free to answer any questions?
Well, yes, except that I have signed an agreement with the college board that the terms of my dismissal cannot be disclosed, and I don't propose to do that.
On November the 21st, 1980, you, it says in your supporter's introduction, after 13 years as director of Kalamalka Centre, were given the option of resigning, dismissal, or early retirement. Is that correct?
Basically, it was a verbal presentation, and I was given two alternatives, early retirement or dismissal.
What, did they tell you why?
I inquired if possibly it was because of some administrative matters, and the only answer that I received was that it was basically a philosophical difference between myself and the board.
It was not, was it suggested to you at all, and I'm only leading blindly in the dark, that it was to do with your administrative competence at all?
That was, no, there was nothing alluding to that at all.
Why did you accept early retirement instead of saying, fire me and I'll sue you?
After the initial discussions, and I knew what the alternatives were, I consulted legal counsel, and the legal counsel indicated that it would probably be about 2 years before a settlement could be arrived at in this matter. And I agonized over this over the weekend, and I have a family to support, I have a child at school, and I can't be without funds for 2 years, so I simply opted for the early retirement.
What are the details of the early retirement plan? I mean, for how long How much leave of absence with pay did they give you?
Well, that's one of the factors that I am unable to disclose.
You can't tell me.
That's right.
Whether it's 6 months or
That's correct.
6 years.
That's correct. That's the document that I signed with the college board.
That had to be confidential.
That's correct.
Well, I've asked them too, and they won't tell me either.
That's right.
How old are you, Frank?
57.
57. You've been a college professor up there for 13 years,
That's
and you had a career prior to that.
Yes, I was with the Vernon School Board since 1952, and I was 1 year as a teacher in Trail.
Did you have independent legal advice on your deal?
Yes.
And you had time to consider it?
Yeah, well, in a sense, yes. I was acquainted of.
See, I'm reading the public statement here.
Okay, I appreciate that.
And I've got to put their case to you, even if they're not here.
Okay.
They say Mr. Paul was never presented with the ultimatum to resign immediately or be dismissed.
Well, that is not the information I received from the people that talked to me. Basically, they indicated that I had no recourse, that the board, by resolution, requested my dismissal or early retirement, and that basically it was to take effect as soon as possible. And I assumed that possibly we had some time, but what transpired later on was that they set a deadline of 12 noon the following Thursday. So basically, I had 6 days in which to decide what I was going to do.
Got to try once again, because I have this predilection for detail. Did you get a generous settlement?
My legal advice indicated that the early retirement settlement was probably better than what I could get by suing.
From the courts?
That's correct.
But you didn't grieve this attempt to dismiss you. It was an attempt to dismiss you.
That's correct.
You
No,
could have grieved it.
I could have, that's
You
correct.
didn't grieve it.
That's correct.
You took the money and ran.
That's correct.
But at the same time, does that not weaken your case very much in this public furor?
Okay, you have to consider various factors when you're making a decision. And at that time, I had no idea how much support I had in the community. You have to remember that prior to my dismissal, there were 7 or 8 other administrators that have left the college, and they all disappeared for various reasons. I don't happen to know what they all are. And I figured that basically I was just another one of those individuals, and I figured that I was going to get the best financial settlement for myself and my family.
One question before the break. Why do you think they called you in and said, now look, Mr. Pauls, we don't want you anymore, and we're going to give you the chance of early retirement, resign, or dismissal? Why? I mean, don't just tell me philosophical. What philosophical difference?
Well, basically, I think that my approach to administration is that my primary commitment is to the students, the faculty, and the community. And for a long time, the administration has felt that my primary loyalty should be to the administration.
How did this show, though? Did this show, for instance, in penny pinching on courses? Did it show on not sufficient staff? Did you fight with the board on those things?
Yes, we did.
Webster, and more on the Kalamalka crisis with Neil Davidson and Frank Pauls and some of the others after the break. It's an unusual situation in this educational kerfuffle or crisis or caper in Vernon, in the Kalamalka Centre of the Okanagan College. Because normally personnel matters are, I think everyone would agree, a subject of confidentiality. In fact, the board of the Okanagan College makes that point very strongly in the one detailed press release that they put out. The board has no desire to prejudice the future employment potential of any employee. You're 57, aren't you?
Yes.
Now, it's quite clear from the board's thing that the executive committee discussed your performance on numerous occasions during the last 2 years. How long have you held the job?
This particular job?
Yeah.
I have been in administration with the Okanagan College since its inception.
But as executive director?
5 years.
And they've deliberated at length on your performance at least 5 occasions during the past year alone.
They could well have, but those deliberations were never communicated to me on all occasions.
What does it say? Have you seen your own records?
I have never seen them until last Friday, and last Friday was the first time that I have seen my personnel.
Is there anything on them which you can tell me about, or which you want to tell me about, which indicated why they wanted to give you the old chop?
Well, I think there are a number of things there. As you know, in the past, a number of inquiries have come through the Okanagan. The Weingard Commission and latterly the Fisher Task Force came through, and they felt that the response by the community was fomented by myself, basically, that I had the high profile with the college, and therefore I basically was responsible for the response that the community made.
You mean the board of directors on your file indicated that somebody's nose was out of joint because you had a high profile?
It would appear as if the statements that are listed there are in response to some of the events that occurred.
Is that new to you, Neil Davidson? Did you know that before Friday?
No, I had no idea what was on his file.
Now, it's a delicate area I must get rid of right now. In your own statement on December the 2nd, you said, I will seek legal redress against any individuals making false statements questioning your integrity,
Yes.
which naturally would be of grave concern. The college has done none of that.
Well, obviously, some factors must have come from my personal file. There was an event where money was missing from the Vernon Centre, and the RCMP fraud squad was called in. The person that perpetrated that is known to them, and the college did not prosecute the situation, and they felt that for the person's sake they would not disclose any of the information, and to my knowledge that has never been done.
But it was nothing to do with you.
Nothing to do with me. But the innuendo that circulated in the community was that basically my honesty was questioned because of that disappearance of money.
But you're not suggesting that anyone in an official place, what would probably happen is what happens when somebody like you disappears, like we have a number of parallel situations involving people in public places, where when something happens, the public scuttlebutts and gossips.
Well, yeah, I suppose that's correct. But the community really, they felt that because I opted for the early retirement, there was something in my background that I didn't wish disclosed.
Which is not true. And which the board would concur with in our little public meeting right just now, totally and absolutely. Would they not, Neil Davidson?
I would think so.
And that's why I indicated that I would be...
I just wanted to deal with that, and I'm glad you told me that bit about that other matter, because if I don't ask you this question, and this is seen in Vernon, they'll say, why didn't Webster ask the question based on his own statement of December the 2nd, 1980? Well, now here I have Pat Colbert, and you're a faculty member at which centre?
At the Kalamalka Centre.
How do you feel about Frank Paul's leaving the college?
I'm very upset. I'm here as a spokesman for the faculty at the Kalamalka Centre. The faculty there are very upset about Frank leaving. He's been, as far as they're concerned, an excellent administrator. In my own personal perspective, I worked in colleges and universities now for about 12 years. He's the best administrator I've worked with. A person who facilitates education. Maybe he's not a paper shuffler, but he's an excellent person to work with.
Do you have the support of all of the faculty at the Kalamalka Centre?
All except one.
All except one. How many
Yes.
faculty are there?
Well, I represent we sent a letter to the board asking for an investigation, or asking for a reinstatement of Frank Paul, actually, and it had 34 names on it.
Now, what about the rest of the faculty throughout this Okanagan College?
Well, as far as we know, they're not being involved in this particular
They're
situation.
not being involved in this particular thing at all.
No.
Now I want to get back to Neil Davidson for a moment. You deal with personnel matters all the time in council, don't you?
Correct?
And don't you deal with them in camera?
Yes?
Even if you dismiss somebody?
Yes?
And don't you refuse to give reasons even if you dismiss somebody?
Yes, but in the one situation that I've been faced with during the time that I've been on council, there was a dismissal, and the person that was dismissed actually was a voluntary retirement, simply disappeared into the woodwork. Had there been a public inquiry of any consequence, we would have met the terms of the public inquiry.
What terms do you want to see for a public inquiry in this?
All I want to see is just a full disclosure as to why Frank Paul was released on what we believe to be non-existent complaints.
Are they not entitled to make that decision if they so wish?
Well, I think there's a matter...
do you have tenure in community colleges?
The faculty does, but basically the administration at Okanagan College is dealt with on an individual one-to-one basis.
You mean if I'm a professor on the faculty of the college, I can't and I have tenure, I'm there forever and a day, more or less.
Well, not necessarily. You can be dismissed for cause.
I've never heard of any.
Well,
you know that. But you did not have tenure as such.
oh, absolutely no protection whatsoever.
You're at the pleasure, more or less.
That's
of
correct,
The board
absolutely.
of directors
Yes,
of the council.
yeah.
Where do we go from here then? How is this affecting the college, and how is it affecting Vernon?
We think that there's no item that has more significance in the overall view of our community than good education, and we're simply saying this, that if Frank Paul is incompetent, and we don't think he is, but if Frank Paul is incompetent, then how did it take the college council 13 years to determine that he was incompetent? And if he is not incompetent, then what reasons are there for his having been released? Because he's the man that is responsible to the whole community for post-secondary education. We feel that's important, prime importance.
Has it had any effect on the morale at the college?
Yes, yes it has, Jack. It's actually had a very negative effect on morale. Faculty are very upset, and I think it's affecting the students in a manner too. I think what's very much upsetting in this particular situation is that the situation where a college board seems to have the ability to act against the wishes of the faculty, against the wishes of the students, and against the wishes of the community, and seems to be in opposition to a whole community. And it's very upsetting for everybody involved.
Webster, and more on the Kalamalka Centre crisis after the break. The reason I'm dealing with this Kalamalka Educational Centre crisis in detail is because of the incredible storm of protest which has been whipped up over the early retirement, willing early retirement, no?
no, oh no, I did not.
Unwilling early
Unwilling,
retirement.
yes.
By Frank Pauls.
Correct.
The most recent executive director for the past 5 years and there since the beginning. Do you think it was connected with any advocacy you had for a bigger role for Kalamalka in relation to Kelowna and the other centres?
Yes. I think that the post-secondary education in Vernon has been in the Army camps for 13 years, and I think that that's too long a period for students to exist in substandard classrooms.
Have you been advocating better accommodation and a bigger share of the pie?
Yes, certainly.
Has
More
this
courses.
Has this upset the board?
Well, I would assume so, yes. There are no two-year technology courses at the Vernon Centre. This year they instituted a business administration program the first year, and it is anticipated that they're going to put in the second year this coming year. But with the decline in academic enrollments, it is very, very essential that vocational and technical training be stressed at community colleges.
So therefore, have you been a continual irritant in upgrading both the campus facilities and the educational output of the Kalamalka Centre?
Certainly. That's my job.
Do you consider that to be the real reason for your the pressure on you, causing you to take in early retirement?
I would think that that's part of the question, certainly.
Was that discussed when were you given the option to quit, be fired, or take early retirement by the board as such?
No, the two vice principals talked to me about it and indicated that the college board had passed a resolution requesting my early retirement or dismissal.
So therefore, when it says here in their press release that the decision concerning you was based on appraisals of your work over several years, was reached after long deliberation, you think that probably includes your nagging about improvements in the Kalamalka Centre?
I would think so, yes.
You're 57 now. Here we have Margo Steward, concerned citizen, and Danny, you say your name.
DeGirolamo.
Say your full name.
Daniel Trainer DeGirolamo, with a hyphen in between the trainer
And we
and the...
dropped it. You don't even look like an Englishman.
Listen, we have to do something to legitimize the background
Well,
from time to
we're
time.
going to wipe out trainer.
Right on,
Danny DeGirolamo.
Right from the Gulchin Trail.
Margo and Danny. Why bother with this particular fight? I mean, why not just sit back and let them appoint a new executive director after posting the job in due course? He might be a better guy than Frank. He might be worse, but it's none of your business, is it?
No, perfectly good reason why we defend this issue. Frank is well loved in the Vernon area. He has been very, very helpful to students in the area, helped them get scholarship monies, helped them in every way. He's an administrator whose office door is open. The students all know him, and he's probably one of the only administrators in British Columbia that there would be an uproar when and if he were fired, and there is.
Are you a teacher too, Frank? I forgot it.
Yes, I taught until I came into the directorship 5 years ago. I taught at the college until then.
Arts and sciences.
That's correct.
As I
Biology.
recall.
That's right.
Now, Danny DeGirolamo, your function, what do you do for a living?
I'm a teacher in the public school system. I've also worked with Simon Fraser University, and as a matter of fact, worked out of the campus where Frank has been, Kalamalka
Okay,
Centre.
and tell me about the public meetings you've had. How much of a furor, or is it merely a little clique of interested people whipping up a storm?
All right, let me start by saying that the storm of protest was not whipped up. It really arose from what I call grassroots. It is a true grassroots movement. And what happened, Jack, when the word of Frank's forced retirement came out, the community was stunned. It was absolutely and totally stunned. It came without warning, and we were shocked. People stopped each other in the street saying, what can we do? What's happened? Why has this happened? Letters went to the editor, letters went to the ministry, and there was no focus. I got together with a few people and said, listen, we have got to put a handle on this thing. It cannot be allowed to happen this way. So we did call a public meeting, Jack, on very short notice. 400 people turned up at a gymnasium on December 11th. At close to Christmas, by that time, 2 board members had resigned, and I think this is a point that we have to make, is that one of those board members was the representative of the Vernon School Board, who called this the greatest educational injustice that our community has ever seen, and he resigned.
Well, I shouldn't have missed that. You're saying that a current member of the board of the 2 current members of the board of the Okanagan College resigned in high dudgeon over what they felt was unfair treatment or a bad choice, bad decision in getting rid of Frank.
Right.
Definitely. Jack, the reason that the public is concerned is partly because of the respect and the love that that community has for Frank, but it's also partly based on a concern for justice generally, and we examined the circumstances, what little we know of them surrounding that dismissal, and we find it came at a strange time, before Christmas, right out of the blue. It came at a time when Okanagan College does not have a principal in place. There is no chief executive officer.
You mean in Kelowna?
In Kelowna, that's right. The last principal left in June, and the new one is coming on the site in March. This dismissal, the motion was added to the item was added to the agenda that day. Mr. Grant, the Vernon representative, was absent from that meeting. He had no prior knowledge that Mr. Paul would be dismissed, and it happened just like that.
Wham bam.
That's right. He went back to the board and said, please reconsider. Reconsider, because in Mr. Grant's opinion, there were no grounds for this dismissal.
Was
None.
Grant was the guy who made the public statement?
He did make
And
a
he
public
quit the
statement.
board.
He quit the board, and both he and Mrs. Wolf came to that public meeting, and Mr. Grant made a statement both to the school board and to the public meeting. And we feel, as citizens of the community, that there are enough unanswered questions in this case that there should be an inquiry. We have requested, thousands of people have requested of the ministry an inquiry. We have a petition.
Who is the Minister of Education at the moment? They changed like...
Mr. Brian
Brian
Smith.
Smith.
What is his response?
His response is that the Okanagan College Board is a duly constituted authority which has the responsibility in personnel matters.
His is hands off.
His is
What
hands
about
off at the moment.
Pat Jordan?
We have tried to meet with Pat Jordan. Pat Jordan keeps going back to the fact that Frank must ask for the inquiry. Frank cannot ask for an inquiry. He is in agreement with the board. We, as citizens of that community, can ask for an inquiry. We have asked Mrs. Jordan to institute an inquiry. She has not, to this date, met with us.
What are you going to get if you get an inquiry? What do you expect to come out of an inquiry? Forget about administration. What do you expect to come out? Do you expect to see some internecine warfare on the development of the various centres of the Okanagan College? Is that the problem?
Jack,
Do you want a separate college in Vernon?
no, we do not want a separate college in Vernon at this particular time. I think the whole college picture has got to be examined, Jack. Our concern at this time is that Frank is the 9th or the 10th administrator in the last 18 months to have left Okanagan College. Now, I'm not suggesting that they were all fired or pushed out, but they left, and some of them under rather mysterious circumstances. One of them, as a matter of fact, from Salmon Arm, Mr. John Hart, has suggested that he can see a parallel between his situation, and he predicted Frank's dismissal or early retirement. Now, our concern is that the whole decision-making process has got to be opened up.
You will concede that normally personnel matters are a matter for confidentiality.
Absolutely.
As a matter of fact, you're so bound by this legal confidentiality, you can't even tell me what your deal is.
That's right. That's correct.
Pity, isn't it? Even at that, though, do you not think now that you made a mistake by making a deal instead of going public on it and suing? Or grieving?
Not for myself. Not for myself. You see,
Are you a willing participant in the center of this to attend a public inquiry and, if such was so decided, be reinstated?
certainly.
After the break. Very much of a problem to jump in with both feet into a complex story like this, but it has to be done from time to time because the news interests of the interior must be attended to, and educationalists throughout the province. Now, you know the cast of characters I've got now. We're playing musical chairs here. Frank Paul, executive director and former executive director, who signed a confidential deal on his early retirement with the Kalamalka Centre of Okanagan College. Neil Davidson, the mayor of Vernon, here as a private citizen, and Danny DeGirolamo, Danny DeGirolamo, who's a a teacher who's a concerned citizen. Now, you've been listening to the next segment, Neil Davidson.
Yes.
What is your primary concern if you don't get a public inquiry or some kind of public explanation in detail?
Well, the concern is where we go from here, because we're very concerned about the whole issue of accountability. The Okanagan College does not have a board of governors or any such board as has SFU and UBC, and we would think that in a normal channel course that the board would be accountable to the minister. There has been some correspondence from the minister, which I have not seen, but I am told says that the board itself, the college itself, is basically self-autonomous. So we're saying, okay, Frank Paul has a grievance. Where does he go to? Does he go back to the board who simply said, we want you out on an early retirement? Where does he go to get any redress for his situation?
Well, no, he can't ask for redress now.
No, but where could he have gone?
He could have gone to a grievance.
Yeah,
That is correct.
Okay,
Yeah, or sue for wrongful dismissal.
Yes,
That's
okay.
right.
That's
All
right.
right, one
Or
or the other.
not taking independent legal advice and signed
That's correct.
the mystery deal you have.
That's correct.
I say that kindly.
But it's the accountability issue that we're concerned about. Accountability from the college council to the community as a whole, and indeed through the Minister of Education.
Are you convinced, going back to your opening remarks, that if there were such an accountability, it would show prejudice against the proper development of the Kalamalka Centre in Vernon?
I have to answer that yes.
Jack, I think the point that Neil has raised of accountability is paramount here. We acknowledge the fact that that college board has the legal right to deal in personnel matters and to deal with them in camera. Our point is that thousands and thousands and thousands of Vernon citizens have lost confidence in that board to make a good decision in this particular matter. And we are suggesting that when a publicly appointed board, and let's face it, there are a lot of political appointments on that board, when they make a decision that seems to be contrary to the interests of a large number of people in one community, that there should be some kind of a review process. Jack, they're spending millions and millions of dollars of taxpayer money. I don't know what it cost them to get rid of Frank, but he's only one of 10 men who have left, and I'm sure there have been some sizable settlements. Now, I'm not suggesting the public should know the amounts of those settlements.
I don't know why they shouldn't.
Well, maybe they should too.
I mean, we had a caper the other day with remember we had the two-headed coroner for 5 minutes. Remember, one guy was to be fired and another guy moved in. There was an argument over who owned the chair. Well, that all died a death. Now, why did that die a death? Because his settlement was made, and in it is a confidentiality clause that nobody can talk about the settlement, so all of a sudden everybody is happy. Now, your case is different. Frank presumably is happy, or he wouldn't have signed the settlement in some extent, But he's still prepared to be the centerpiece of your protest.
But the point is that I hope Frank got a great settlement, but my concern is not with him. The concern of that community is with the board, which is making those kinds of settlements and not being accountable to us.
Have you lost faith in the board of Okanagan College based in Kelowna?
Yes?
Have you lost faith?
Oh, most decidedly, most decidedly. And I lost faith because we went down there and we provided them with a representation which I think was sensible, which was logical. Jack, we requested they do one of two things, that they reinstate Mr. Paul and have it reviewed by the new principal, or that they open it up to an inquiry. Now, Jack, if they have nothing to hide, I say right now, that challenge is down. Open it up if they feel they've acted properly.
Question to Frank Pauls, whose agreement must be reached before you do a thing.
Yes, certainly.
Have you any objection to if the board of Okanagan College or the Minister of Education said, okay, they want an inquiry, I'll give an inquiry? Have you any objection to
None
an
whatsoever.
inquiry?
None whatsoever.
Providing somebody tells you that it's happening and it's official,
That's correct.
you would
Yes.
respond.
Yes.
Well, you've got a bit of a case.
We think we have.
I think your case is weakened by the fact that Mr. Pauls had independent legal advice when he settled. I'm not blaming him for it because he's got to think of the welfare of his wife and family.
Yeah, well, we all have 20/20 vision after the event.
And you, of course, as a lawyer, know how complex and difficult suits for wrongful dismissal can be.
Yes.
If the government with tax money is going to fight you.
Yes?
Could take 1,000 years, couldn't it?
Well, 500 anyway.
Yeah. And cost an arm and a leg, too, wouldn't it?
Yes?
At least a leg. Okay, gentlemen, have I missed any basic points?
I don't think
Oh,
so.
I've got one thing to say. I have read the full release of the Okanagan College issued by Alec McLennan, which seems to make the case that all possible consideration was given, but that they had made up their mind that you were going to go one way or another.
I would assume so.
And I'm told this very morning that as this is a personal matter, we, the board of Okanagan College, do not want to discuss it in public. So let me sum up. No, you've got something to say.
I would just like to say, Jack, while I have the opportunity here, that in 20 years in that community, I have never seen an issue which has brought such solidarity to a wide cross-section of people. It's just unbelievable the kind of support that has come out. And I made this point before, and I have to make it again, that I think the people of Vernon are just tremendous. Not just for the support for Frank, but for the fact that they became concerned enough to say, hey, listen, let's just dig our heels in over this, and let's get some answers.
Forget something. Brian Smith has been asked for an inquiry or an explanation.
Yes?
What did he say? He's the director of, the Minister of Education.
Yeah, when the city council wrote him, it was over my signature, and we asked for such an inquiry. We have not had a response. Now, there have been other letters go out to him, and I don't know what response he's had, other than the one to which Frank Paul alluded a little earlier in this broadcast.
Which said what?
That this was strictly a personnel matter,
And Pat Jordan has been no good to you at all.
I'm afraid not. Pat has said that she's working closely with the citizens group. We have not, I repeat, we have not been able to have a meeting where we could sit down and discuss this situation with Mrs. Jordan.
So the next step is up to whom?
I would say it's up to the ministry to respond, and depending on that response, I think the committee with which I'm working, it's a committee of 15 or 16 people, has to call another public meeting, go back to the public and say, we have failed in the mandate which we received from the original public meeting to secure an inquiry. And then it's up to that public meeting to decide, Jack, what's next.
One basic brutal question I should have asked earlier. Are there any capital P political influences involved in this? In other words, and I'm only reaching in the dark, is this a party political fight in any way? Are there any party politics involved in it?
Could I answer it this way, that I have no proof of it, but I suspect that there is?
You think social credit side?
Well, I think that there are party politics within the party involved in this thing.
Oh, I see. But there's not, for
I have no
instance,
proof of it.
There are not two varying political groups fighting each other
Oh,
involved in it.
definitely, definitely not. As a
you
matter of fact, the community group, Jack, is made up of very strong social creditors. It's made up of people who are identified as supporting the NDP. It cuts across all strata, and it's definitely not political. Now, I suspect that perhaps the reasons that underlie the whole college. Issue may be political.
No, you've answered my question.
Good.
Your broadly based community groups, 17, 18, 19, and 20, cut across all normal party lines, and there are no other irritant political groups in it.
That's right, and that group, that committee came from a public meeting of 400 people.
Well, gentlemen, you lobbied me for this meeting. I was pleased to give it to you to show that we can pay some attention to the interior. My thanks to you, Frank Pauls.
Thank you.
I wish you best of luck in your early retirement, or if there's a public inquiry, you return to the job. And to you, Neil Davidson, and Danny DeGirolamo, Margo Steward, with a D at the end of it, and Pat Colbert from the Faculty Association. Next. Well, I don't know. The board wouldn't come on with me. You can see why.
Yeah.
I'll phone Brian Smith and see if Brian Smith has anything to say about it, if you so wish. I'm not due to have him on for a while, but I'll phone him and ask him, and if he has any comment to make to me, I'll put it on the air as soon as possible.
And just remember that Frank is skiing at our expense.
He's too old to ski.
Oh, no, he's
You
not.
should see him. He and Neil, boy, I'll tell you.
Time I had early retirement, I wasn't required to disclose the deal. My thanks, gentlemen. Next,
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jeff.
Steve Wyatt, the Sunday shopper, after the break. My personal convictions prevent me from shopping on a Sunday. But I'm the first to say that the new provincial Sunday shopping law or confusion is really quite stupid. So Steve Wyatt III went out to see what happened in Gastown yesterday.
Jack, Gastown on a Sunday was never like this. The sun came out and so did several thousand shoppers. 90% of the merchants down here have opened their doors in defiance of the Holiday Shopping Act. What it was a celebration of unrestrained consumerism.
Ladies and gentlemen, in honor of today being a very historic day in Gastown, we'd like to play a special request for you from the merchants. It's entitled, Never on a Sunday. 1, 2, 3, 4.
The merchants threw a party, or a wake, depending on which side of the law you stand. Either way, this party was a huge success. The minimum amount they say they will lose if they are forced to close on Sundays. They say they should be exempt from the law because of Gastown's historical importance and its role as a tourist attraction.
The legislation will kill Gastown. 25 to 40% of our volume is done on Sundays. We're talking about a $50 million industry employing 5,000 people in the summertime. It goes down the tube if we have to close on Sunday.
This law could kill Gastown?
This law would kill Gastown if it turns out to be an enforceable thing and it turns out we have to go. So if you're going to die anyway, you might as well go down fighting.
Peter, do you think it's a lot of people just looking for a bargain, or are the people on the street today supporting you?
Steve, we made it a 25% off party because it accentuates the 25% that we're going to lose. The minimum we're going to lose goes up to 40. I think that there's enough sales and people are used to sales enough that 25% off is not going to bring the people into Gastown like what are coming in right now.
But don't you stand to make a huge profit on a day like this if you get 30,000 people down here?
We ask for supporters down here. We're not asking for buyers, but we will give them the bargain if they want to buy, okay?
So you're convinced they're supporting you?
We're convinced of that, yeah.
Are you here to support Sunday shopping, or are you looking for a bargain?
We just bought something, so I guess we're supporting it.
Do you think you should be allowed to shop on Sunday if you feel like it?
Yeah, I think so. What do you think?
I don't know. I guess it's okay in areas like this.
Well, if a guy buys a license to run a business, he should open that business when he wants and close it when he wants. That's my opinion of it.
So you think you support the merchants then in this case?
Well, if they want to open 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, that's fine with me. If they got a license, they should do that.
You're open today and you stand to be fined $10,000. Is it worth it?
I guess we're going to find out, aren't we?
What does Sunday mean to your business, Sundays generally?
It's a pretty good piece of our business on a particularly good day. And certainly during the summer months, it's absolutely necessary.
Sunday shopping means that a great many people who are here on conventions and visiting from the States can come in and shop. Very often, half of our cash take for the day is in American currency. I think it's really great if we could stay open because this is the cream of the business.
You need that American dollar.
Oh, we need that American dollar.
Is that how much do you stand to lose? Can you estimate how much you stand to lose if you had to close on Sundays?
Well, not having the regular hours that people could count on us being open would probably be maybe 25%, maybe more. I don't know.
Customers left their money and their signatures on petitions stationed in every store. And for the second Sunday in a row, Vancouver police browsed as well. They were gathering information for the Attorney General.
We're taking the information from the shopkeepers, you know, the proper name of the company and, you know, what is being sold, the type of items, and we're submitting all this to Crown Counsel with a request that these people be summoned.
After your investigation last Sunday, it was intimated that charges would be laid at least against 2 shop owners. What's happening there?
We have supplied Crown Counsel with the information on, it was more than 2, I think it was a total of 7, and with a request for summons on each one, or for each one. And I don't believe that they have processed the summonses yet.
Terry Goff is one of those expecting a summons today. His fight with Victoria could cost him a $10,000 fine.
Well, the police came into my store 2 times. They came in and they told me that there was a possibility that I might be charged. They came back 2 days later and told me that I am being charged. They wanted further information. And I haven't heard from them since, but I was expecting a subpoena yesterday. Possibly I'll get it tomorrow.
If you're charged, will you continue to be open on Sundays?
I have to. It's my livelihood. If I close on Sunday, I have to go bankrupt. There's no other way. 35% of my business is done, as you can see, on a Sunday. And most of my business on Saturday and Sunday is done through the tourists. Their dollars aren't here on Monday. They're going back home.
What do you think of it?
It was a huge success, Jack, and I think a lot of people out there, like I said, they could have been looking for a bargain, but seem to be supporting the merchants.
Maybe if they keep 25% off every Sunday, they'll do even better.
A bigger crowd.
Some of the stores had little pasties roped off.
Yes, some stores were respecting the law. In other words, they were roping up parts of their store. So
you can sell handicrafts, you can't sell this, you can do that, right. You can be educational, you can't be this.
That's right, handicrafts you can sell, but then some were imported, so.
Steve, you have managed to confirm my prejudice that the Sunday shopping law, as it presently is constituted with the odd, strange plebiscites, is an ass. A-double-S, in the old-fashioned English meaning of the word, meaning donkey. Next, we're going to talk to the National Indian Brotherhood after the break. I may be one of the few people in the country who actually sits down at night and watches what is often very dull coverage of the Constitutional Committee in Ottawa. And there have been many Indian spokesmen in front of that Constitutional Committee. With me this morning is Ryley, who is president of the National Indian Brotherhood, and his national press secretary, Bill Flamand.
Right.
Flamand?
Flamand, Flamand.
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 Any way you like.
Any way you like.
As long as you pronounce it properly.
Yes.
Now, have you appeared in front of this committee?
Yes, I have appeared in front of this committee.
What did you tell the Constitutional Committee about what you want done to improve the references to Indians in the Liberal Act?
Well, basically the section that makes reference to Indian people of Canada is Section 24. And what we've been asking all along is that this section be a positive reference to Aboriginal and treaty rights and self-determination. In fact, what we've gotten out of it is a negative, cursory reference to rights that we may have, and that's not acceptable at all to Indian people of Canada.
Rights which you may have sometime in the future, presumably if the courts, after an examination, come down on your side.
That's, yes, that's, well, one of the things that we've been arguing, and I think one of the things that have been upsetting the Canadian public is the fact that the present government is not seeking to obtain any kind of agreement between the dissenting provinces
dissenting public and the Indian people of Canada. Instead, it's moving ahead with a very upsetting unilateral action in England that I think is causing this country to divide more than it is helping them.
Are you dissatisfied with the lack of success when you went to England in an attempt to influence the Thatcher government?
No, we're not. Matter of fact, we're very satisfied with the impact we did make over there. It basically told us that we've still got a lot of work to do over there. The kind of lobby that we've undertaken has merely touched the surface, and we must do tremendous amount more.
Do you expect the English government or the British government to rescue you from Trudeau's unilateral patriation?
No, we're simply asking the English government to be fair in any kind of consideration of this resolution. Basically on the fact that we feel that there must be agreement in Canada first. There must be a negotiated agreement in Canada first before they pass this. And underlying this is the fact that we are not against patriation, but we would like to see agreement first.
Before it comes back. In other words, you agree basically with the position of many other non-Indians in the country who think it's ludicrous that a package should be passed blind by the British government without the Canadian peoples being in on its detail.
Yes, and we're receiving the support for this position is growing.
Let me ask Bill Flamand something. Who does the National Indian Brotherhood in fact represent all the way through? Are you the biggest, the most powerful, the most coast to coast, or what? Because there are a number of schisms in Indian representation.
Well, whatever definition you want to use, Jack, we represent the Indians in Canada as a whole, all across the country, all 300,000 registered Indians in Canada.
300,000. Now, but the detail is so vastly different. In eastern Canada, you've got, and down the prairies, you have clearly cut treaties on which you can rely for some kind of justice. Is that not so?
Well, let's keep in mind, Jack, that this is a very large country, and we are a people that are scattered all over the country. And for us to say that we represent certain groups and not other groups would be wrong. We do represent everybody, and like I said, we are a diversified people. Naturally, we're going to have some semblance of talk of some kind of split.
What I was meaning was the fact that there are areas, surely, in which you have made satisfactory land settlements with some governments. Are there?
I'll allow the President to answer that.
Okay. There's been approximately 3 settlements out of, I would say, thousands of potential claims. It's really a question of, I guess, incompetency on the part of the government in its, I guess, move or its sincerity in wanting to settle claims.
James Bay is one that comes to mind.
That's right.
That was the big settlement.
That was one of the big settlements.
Are there any other comparable big settlements whereby the tribes or groups have been paid and given rights to minerals, etc., or hunting on the land as well as cash settlement?
No, there are none other, except if you use the American, one of the American examples, the Alaskan settlement.
Yeah, but you can't really quote that in Canada, can you?
No, actually there's a marked difference in the manner in which the settlements were arrived at.
Do you find that the non-Indian is largely disinterested in your particular problems as to land settlement because he thinks to himself, well, whatever they give the Indians in the way of settlement, I, the non-Indian taxpayer, are going to have to kick in for?
Yes, there has been a bit of indifference in the past, but now I think that the public is becoming very interested in, and especially so in British Columbia, where most of British Columbia is not settled by treaty. In other words, the Indians still own the land, and that's the position from which they see it.
Are you suggesting that the whole of British Columbia is owned by Indians?
Well, not all of it, but I think approximately 90%.
What is your case there for those lands which have been traditionally occupied and lived on by Indians, which have not been settled by the white man except for industry, are Indian lands?
That's right. Based on the fact that Indian people have been sovereign nations, they have not given up their sovereignty. They've treated as nations with the British Crown, and as such, these treaties have recognized the sovereignty. As a matter of fact, the whole basis for the British North American Act was on the fact that British, through making treaties with Indian people, felt they also had a right to deal with the country that was formed, Canada.
I don't often take calls on Indian questions. This morning might be a good time. If you have any questions for Del Ryley or Bill Flamand of the National Indian Brotherhood. By the way, how was the treatment you got by that committee? Was it good, considerate treatment?
I think it was excellent, and I think we done an excellent job of educating them as to the issues, as well as the public.
Don't you get the feeling, though, that any Liberal committee under Trudeau's guidance is a rubber stamp?
Really, and I don't feel that the feelings of the committee will be reflected in any final product that they come up with.
It'll be the boys in the big office who decide what's going to be
in the cabinet. It'll be Mr. Trudeau himself.
Or Jean Chrétien.
Yes.
Because he's busy touring the world, offering money to other to other nations.
That's right, and we intend to get out to the world as well on a much broader basis in the very near future.
Calls on the National Indian Brotherhood after the break. Del Ryley and National Indian Brotherhood. Nasty question. Well, it's not nasty. Who finances the National Indian Brotherhood?
It comes from a number of sources, mostly the Secretary of State.
How much does he give you?
Approximately $300,000 a year.
With which you run your office?
That's right.
And pay your salaries?
That's right.
For how big a staff? I'm not complaining, I just want to know.
We've got a
ask
staff
anybody
of
else the same question.
approximately 40.
And you're not allied with any of the statements that have come up from up north. What was that one? Remember that statement? Oh, no, self-determination.
That's right.
Do you mean separation?
No.
What do you mean?
We mean basically self-determination as outlined in the Charter of Human Rights that was passed by the United Nations.
How can you have self-determination unless you have your own territory in which you can self-determine?
Once land claims are settled and once we can add a share of the natural resources, the resources in Canada to the territories that Indian people already have, then we can have it. Self-determination, but within Canada, and a self-determination based on Indian people making their own decisions.
In communities.
And controlling their own institutions.
In communities.
Exactly.
You're not asking for a separate province anywhere in the country.
We're not, possibly, that's a good possibility because Indian people are not part of the political system.
Well, you can only have one, you couldn't have provinces in every province.
No, it's a potential that we could look at all Indian territory in Canada, perhaps as one, you know, but that's only a suggestion. I've heard that suggestion numerous times, and I think it's worth examining.
But self-determination does not mean separation.
No, it does not mean separation.
It just means your share of the natural resources, and you would live normally within the laws of a province.
I think perhaps our own laws, much like we're doing now.
Would you like to get all Indians out of the educational system, our educational system?
Yes, we'd like to control our own educational system.
And of course, it's routine to ask you if you'd like to wipe out the Indian Affairs Branch.
Oh, indeed.
Are they the people?
Well, no. Let me clarify that. Better still, I think I'll let Dale clarify that. After all, he is a politician here, and I'm.
Would you like to wipe out the whole Indian Affairs Department?
Yes, if we were to, I think we'd be much better off right now. One of the problems Indian people are having is that the funding that's going to them, they're in a stage of development now, is very small, and the bureaucracy is such that it would take $5 to spend one. We don't need that.
But could you administer welfare and medical benefits any better than the bureaucrats?
We wouldn't do any worse. I think it's time that we start handling our own affairs. And one of the things I always tell people, we need your support, but we don't need you to do it for us.
Well, you remember there was a time when people were going to withdraw from welfare in British Columbia, but they didn't withdraw very long because they needed the money. Indians.
That's right. And what that means is that Indian people would like to take part in the economy. They'd like to their standard raised at least to that of the rest of the Canadians. And,
okay, but there are many Indian people right now in the economy, in fishing and lumber. I'm thinking of the basic industries. Their status wouldn't change.
No, not. They've achieved a measure of economic self-sufficiency. But the rest of Canada, the average unemployment rate amongst Indian people is 75%, 75 and 80%. That's something that I think needs to be examined.
You still have vast areas of abominable housing.
Yes, it's atrocious. It's equal to the worst in the world.
If the colonial administrators had done a good job of assimilating you in the first place, the problem wouldn't be here today, right?
Or if Indians had assimilated the colonial administrators, we wouldn't have a problem.
From Victoria, go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack. I appreciate having a chance to speak with your two guests this morning. I heard your speaker a moment ago say that the Indian people are not part of the political process in Canada. I think I can understand that. I assume he regrets that fact, doesn't he? He regrets that the Indian people are not part of the political process.
Yes.
I would like to say this, and I'd like to get your reaction. I forget your first name, I'm sorry.
Dale.
Thank you. I fully believe that the land of which you were speaking in part should belong to all of us. And when I say us, I was born in Canada, people who came from Britain. I appreciate that I'm in a little different situation than you are, but I feel the land should belong to no one or no group. Should belong to all of us. We should all have equal rights and equal responsibilities, regardless of whether we were born here or born of native people as you were, or born of people who came from another part of the world. I think.
Well, you see, most of it belongs to the big companies.
Well, that's what I regret. I think that we have given over the resources.
Okay, you don't want to give the Indians back their land.
No, I think we should all own the land in common and share the resources.
Okay, thank you very much. You'll go on forever.
Okay, I think that's a very good observation, and I would like to say that the history of Indian, non-Indian relations in Canada has been one of sharing. Indian people have always shared with the non-Indian, right from the time that they first come over, right through treaty making. But unfortunately, I don't believe they understood the European sense of justice or its legal system.
The European, whether he was Scotch, English, Irish, or French, came in conquest and took it, didn't he? He didn't come to share.
Using their legal system. Yes, they didn't come to share.
They came to take.
But the Indian people shared. And I think...
that was a mistake.
Yes, it was a mistake, and we still have that sense, except that we're much brighter today. Instead, we see things as they really are. Yes, there is a need to share. There still is a need to share. But today, that sharing has to go the other way.
You will concede that the white system, with all its imperfections, has recently done a little bit better in its health care and education for Indians.
Yes, except that you still have a 90% dropout rate in the high schools. And
tragic, I know. Go ahead, please.
Good morning. What I was wondering about was involving the land or the claims made by the Indians in around the Fort Nelson area. It seems to me they did fairly well up there, and he never made any mention of that when he was talking about claims made by Indians.
That was a specific tribal, I forget the name of the band now. They got $100 million on negotiation from the federal government.
Yeah.
And the lawyer was handsomely paid for his work. Well, he was handsomely paid because the Indians wouldn't put up any money up front, and he got a percentage. Was that a fair deal, that Fort St. John settlement? I forget the name of the band.
Well, I guess...
Fort Nelson.
I think it was a blueberry band, I'm not sure.
In any agreement to settle, naturally, there's always some acceptance, I guess, on the part of both parties. I don't know the details of the settlement.
But that was one of the cash settlements for a small group of Indians.
That's very small.
$100 million. I'll take some more calls, too. I've changed my mind. After the break. Del Ryley is president of the National Indian Brotherhood, and Bill Flamand is one of his people. You represent 300,000.
That's correct.
You claim to represent all the Indians.
That's correct.
All the way. And do you expect anything out of Chrétien's proposals this afternoon?
We're not very optimistic. At this point, we realize that the government will be taking a hard stand against us, and we feel that his proposals will reflect that.
Go ahead, please.
Yes. What do you propose to do the terrible alcohol problem amongst the Indian people?
I think the whole social areas is all interconnected, and once you've got people with 75, sometimes 90% unemployment rate, naturally social problems are going to arise, and the government has been concentrating too much any monies that they do supply to Indian in the social welfare area, and very little for development. And in fact, what needs to happen is it to go the other way. Once that happens, a lot of these social problems will begin to take care of themselves.
Fair enough, ma'am. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yep.
I'm not an Indian. Excuse me. In fact, our family is from the lady-in-waiting to Princess...
Never mind the detail, ma'am. Just give us... Lady-in-waiting to whom?
A lady-in-waiting to Princess Victoria. Our family comes from that's the princess, the daughter of Queen Victoria.
We're talking to royalty.
Yeah, but I wish the Indians every success. I mean, it is only their efforts at long last that they are refusing to be cheated any longer.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm sure you appreciate that call.
Thank you.
First time I've spoken to anybody who even knew a lady-in-waiting to Princess Victoria. I thought a lady-in-waiting was somebody pregnant. But obviously I'm not, my couth isn't working this morning. Go ahead, please.
Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
I want to speak to your two guests.
They're here. Do go ahead.
He speaks about how much he's sharing with the Canadian people. Well, isn't the average taxpayer sharing something with the Indians? I'd like him to answer that.
Yes.
We are all sharing. When I pay taxes, I am sharing with the Indian people. They are not employed, so who is paying their unemployment?
Exactly. But does the average taxpayer want to continue with this cycle of paying social welfare type of programs? Or are you more interested in assisting Indian people get away from this kind of existence?
We have no choice. We will have to share in it because the Indian people obviously don't want to help themselves or don't care to help themselves. What is he going to do, have buffalo run all over?
No, that's, well, we realize that the situation, the needs have changed considerably, and we've accepted the fact that we must also use your technology. On the other hand, we also like to keep our values and the fact that we are Indian. And the taxpayer, this will continue to be a burden as long as Indian people aren't making their own decisions. But I think we're at the stage.
There's no easy answer, Dale, because
No.
we're all tied up in the same economy. We're all tied up in the same inflation. We're all tied up in reasonably universal welfare systems. They work out about the same, don't they?
I wish they would. If we had an unemployment rate of 10%, I would have no reason to complain. But ours is, as I mentioned, 75, 80, and 90% in most Indian communities.
But do you honestly think that given your own control, you can do something to bring that down?
Could I ask him something
Yes.
else, Mr. Webster?
Yes, ma'am.
I cannot go back to my forefathers and ask where and reclaim something where I made a bum deal 400, 500, or 100 years ago, when my forefather or my grandfather made a deal with whatever it is and didn't work the land.
Yeah, what she's saying, and I'll put it succinctly, you can't turn back the clock and pretend that with a magic wand you can, fix all the errors overnight.
Yes, except that if someone were to suddenly take your land from you, you would want at least some measure of justice, and that's all Indian people are asking for. We're not asking for it all, but we're saying that let's at least work out some deal.
And at least you're going the peaceable route.
That's right.
Never would be anything but peaceable, would it?
Well,
Indians are as apathetic as non-Indians in this country.
Yes, and we're as patriotic.
See, that's the point. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Last call.
Yes, I'm a Native Indian woman, Adele. During the constitutional representation in Ottawa, you were asked if you will support the Native Indian Women's Movement in the removing of the Section 12(1)B of the Indian Act.
I've only time for a short answer. I'm afraid I wish I'd got you earlier. Do you or don't you?
Well, we agree that discrimination should be wiped out, but the history of the Indian Act is it's full of racism, and it was not developed by Indian people. We agree that it should be wiped out, but the method has to be done by us and based on the constitutional positions that we're putting forward, and not on control again by the Indian Affairs.
Thank you. There I must leave you. I'm sorry. My thanks to Del Ryley, President of the National Indian Brotherhood, and Bill Flamand. I shall be back after the break. Tomorrow morning it's my turn to have a free-for-all with Nelson Skalbania. Find out who he is and what he is and why he is. Fascinating guy. I might have something else for tomorrow morning too. See you at 9 a.m. precisely. Tonight, the crisis at Okanagan College, Kalamalka Centre.